Welcome to the NHL Wraparound podcast featuring Neil Smith, President General Manager of the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, and longtime ESPN NHL veteran Vic Morren. Together, they share no-nonsense opinions on news and issues around the National Hockey League. Whether you're a casual or diehard fan, each episode of NHL Wraparound will leave you more informed. Now, here's your hosts, Neil and Vic.
Free agency is off and running. Welcome to a special edition of NHL Wraparound. Vic Morren along with Neil Smith, and not quite the volume of signings on day one from a season ago. And, you know, Neil, maybe that's a good thing because of the top 6 clubs that spent money on UFAs in 2024. 5 of them missed the playoffs.
Well, and we all remember the splash that Barry Trotz made this time last year with the Nashville Predators and the players that they signed, and it looked like they were a runaway playoff team, if not a Stanley Cup contender, but something went wrong in the water in Nashville, and they had a horrible year.
As the song went, something happened along the way.
That's right, on the way to the Forum. Funny thing happened on the way to the Forum.
Yeah, well, funny thing happened all season was that the Predators never got themselves on track and missed the playoffs badly, never were in it. But obviously for every team in the NHL now, hope continues to spring as we look forward to the 2025-26 season. So as opposed to going through the litany of moves that have taken place, Neil and I are going to discuss a bunch of topics, 10 or so, that are pertinent to free agency, the business of the NHL, and you make your decisions based on what we're going to share with you. So item number 1, and we have to start with the headliner, with Mitch Marner in a sign and trade in exchange for center Nick Roy. And he signs for 8 years, $96 million, $12 million AAV. And I think the interesting point here is that Mitch Marner could have walked. He could have waited another day and then just gone to the Vegas Golden Knights, would have had to have obviously signed for 1 year less than what he got. But is the return of Roy something to avoid a tampering claim that perhaps the Leafs may have made against Vegas had Marner just gone and signed with the Golden Knights?
Yeah, and everybody's doing it. I'm sure that when the Golden Knights and the Leafs talked, and that would be Kelly McCrimmon and Brad Treliving, Brad probably said, no, I don't want anything. Yeah, I'm going to get you for tampering and this and that. And they said, well, okay, then we don't sign him and you get nothing. We're offering you Nick Roy to do a sign and trade. You'll get something back at least. And Nick Roy is a usable NHL player. And so they went that direction. And, you know, it's this tampering stuff. Obviously, they were talking to the representatives of Marner. Vegas was long before today. Mm-hmm. To be able to work out this deal and to be able to figure out how to get him that 8th year. So I don't know what the league's going to do. It will come down to other situations today. We'll talk about where obviously there was tampering going on.
You had raised this issue a year ago, and it's something that we're going to talk about more on Wraparound in a couple of days. But are you surprised that the new CBA did not have something in it that may have opened the negotiating window up by a week so that you wouldn't have these awkward situations like we have? And even the fact that we're just questioning it here. You know, sometimes when there's smoke, there's fire, right?
Well, and on this one, you know there's fire. This is going on all over the place, and I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know that they can do anything. I would imagine that It's got to be the team that loses the player that pulls the string on the tampering charge, and not just the league have their own investigation. But everybody's going to deny that they talked early, and yet it's silly to think that they didn't.
Final note on Marner. Do you think by signing with the Leafs and then getting traded, and that there was a return in a serviceable player, albeit he's going to be a bottom six forward in Toronto, that he saves face with the Maple Leaf fans somewhat, because he did have 9 really good years there?
He's only going to go there once a season, right, with Vegas,
right?
And they're going to boo the hell out of him. They are. They're just going to boo the hell out of him because he left. It doesn't matter how nice he is in this goodbye letter that he wrote. And the Leafs did a nice thing on Twitter saying, thanks for the great 9 years and all this. For some reason, they were blaming him in the playoffs, and which is ridiculous. He's going to hear it from them the same way that Tavares hears it every time he goes to Long Island.
We're going to talk about Tavares towards the end of the show, but as of now, and obviously for the long-term future, the core 4 is now the core 3.
That's right, in Toronto.
Item number 2. Is Bill Zito already the GM of the year for 25-26? Well,
he's done a remarkable job. I mean, nobody can deny that. What move did he make that's a bad move? All GMs make bad moves. They do. Everybody goes through that because, you overpay, or you let somebody go that you shouldn't have, or you didn't qualify somebody that you should have. That happened today, by the way. But I can't come up with something that Zito did that is a bad move. I don't know what someone could point to criticize him.
So let's quickly sum it up. He re-signs Conn Smythe Trophy winner Sam Bennett, 8 years at $8 million. He keeps Brad Marchand in the fold, 6 years at $5.25, and he keeps Aaron Ekblad for 8 years at $6.1 million. Also manages to hold on to Tomas Nosek for a year at $775,000. He was able to sign Daniel Tarasov for 1 year at just over $1 million. That means that Vitek Vanacek is out the door, which we already knew was going to happen. He lost Nate Schmidt to Utah, but then signed Jeff Petrie as a depth piece on defense for 1 year, $775K. And he also lost Sturm to Minnesota. But overall, he kept just about everybody that he wanted in terms of his core pieces. This is just a remarkable job of management by Zito.
Oh, it is, and it's remarkable. But you know what, though, Vic? You can't do that unless the players want to stay, and they're not money-driven. They're driven by success on the ice. And obviously, Bennett, Marchand, Ekblad want to stay with a successful formula, and that means more to them than getting more money from someplace else.
The chance to chase that dynasty title, going after a third straight Stanley Cup in 2026. The weather, no state tax. It's all a great reason to stay. But beyond that, Neil, and as a former GM, is the rising salary cap now the driving factor in general managers using term to a greater degree in keeping players, or is this something that's always been there and we're just becoming more aware of it?
I don't know that it has anything to do with the rising salary cap. I just think it's the way that they get the players the number, and then they're going to use LTR at the end of the guy's career. Like, you take Marchand's contract. He's 37 years old, correct?
Mm-hmm.
6-year contract makes him 43. He's not playing until 43.
Yeah.
So at some point he'll go on LTR and he'll make his last few years of money getting it through that. But the Panthers will still have to pay it. I mean, there's also the fact that, these teams aren't all raking in gazillions of dollars every year from gate proceeds and also from TV contracts and that. So, they must have their own internal budget. Not everybody's going to spend to the cap,
right?
Because they can't. They can't. They just don't have the revenue. But some do. And then there's others that don't make the profit that they need to, but still spend to the cap anyway because their owner wants to. It all depends on your individual situation.
A fascinating situation that's unfolding is taking place in Edmonton, and we've got a couple of pieces that we want to unpack with this. So the first thing they do is they trade Evander Kane to Vancouver to clear up cap space to sign not only Evan Bouchard, they also retain Sperry Kapanen. But at the same time, they lost Connor Brown to Jersey. They lose Corey Perry to LA. They trade Victor Arvidsson to Boston. The goaltending still hasn't been addressed yet. And when we look at a possible extension for Connor McDavid, this is supposed to be a two-part process. In the discussions that we had with Pierre LeBrun a week ago, in that the first piece is McDavid wants to sit back and evaluate and see what the Oilers are doing to improve their status to take that final step and win the Stanley Cup. And then the money comes afterwards. I think from where we're sitting today, this Oiler team is absolutely not better than the one that lost to the Panthers in the Stanley Cup final.
No, they haven't done anything to improve themselves. In fact, I think I was shocked that they let Connor Brown walk and sign Kapanen, and then Arvidsson walked. These were good depth players for the Oilers, and they'll be missed. I don't know where they're going to get them from to fill in for them. And Connor McDavid, if he does re-sign with the Oilers, the chunk of change that he's going to take will make them so that they'll be throwing pennies around to sign their bottom six.
Well, the Oilers have about $4.4 million in cap space. So they still can go out. They still can get some players here. But $4.4 million isn't going to get you a lot. I mean, considering what you've lost from the fiber of that team that has gotten to back-to-back finals.
Yeah, it isn't a lot. And the big thing is the goaltending hasn't been addressed. Their goaltending is still the same, and they haven't done much, but all eyes on them in the next couple of days and see what they do, if anything.
Let's move across the continent, where Noah Dobson was acquired by Montreal in exchange for Emil Heineman, and the 16th and 17th picks in last Friday's first round of the draft. So we know that the Islanders drafted Matthew Schaefer first, then Victor Eklund, the center, and Kashawn Aitchison, who is a defenseman. And I think the Islanders did very well there. But we're going to talk Montreal here because I think the plus side of this deal for the Canadians is that either on one power play unit or two separate units, you've got Dobson and Lane Hudson. And I think that is terrific for them. But Montreal also lost Yoel Armia to Los Angeles, Christian Dvorak to Philly, Michael Pezzetta to Toronto. They're over the cap already. And at $9.5 million, there is no way Dobson is worth that kind of coin. You have watched him the last few seasons at UBS Arena, and this is not a $9.5 million defenseman.
No way. No chance. I mean, he has his defensive liabilities too. Yes, he has a big shot and he moves the puck pretty well, and he's Islanders' number one defenseman, but he's not $9.5 million. Especially when you look around the league and see what other number ones are getting. And he won't even be number one on Montreal. So that means when Hudson's contract's ready to go, what's he going to get, 10 automatically?
So in that regard, do you also believe that drove Evan Bouchard's number up even higher? Because I think there's a lot of opinion on what Bouchard is worth. And I don't think there's any question. He's got the blazing shot. He's a strong playmaker. He stick handles well, but he's still a defensive liability. And you compared him to Reed Larson. I compare him to Sheldon Surrey. And, big shot, good offensive gifts. But what are you losing on your back end there? And would he have been worth $10.5 million had Dobson not signed for 9.5?
Perhaps not. And by the way, they're also paying Nurse a ridiculous amount. So now they've got almost $20 million between those two guys, between Nurse and Bouchard. And Bouchard is a point machine. There's no doubt. But he's a point machine, too, because he's got 97 and 29 up there on the power play with him. I'm not saying he's not a good player. He is. But over 10 million? Like, this is nuts.
So the two of them combined, 10.5, 9.25 for Nurse. Matthias Ekholm gets $6 million. Jake Wallman, $3.4 million. Brett Kulak, $2.75. And Ty Emberson will round out the top six now at $1.3 million. So do the math there. That's a lot of money on defense. You're obviously going to be very top heavy with 97 and 29. But where are those players now going to fill in? Yes, there's Zach Hyman, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is still there. But it just doesn't seem like there's a lot going on in that bottom six now that they're going to need to really have to build up in order to get back to a final again.
We've all seen how important the bottom six forwards are in the playoffs. Marchand's line for Florida was dominant, and you need those bottom six guys because everybody is going to concentrate, of course, on the two big lines for each team, and then it's whoever can battle better on those bottom six. Right now, Edmonton doesn't have it. They've lost so many guys, so we'll have to keep our eyes on Stan Bowman and the Edmonton Oilers and see how they fill in.
I know we've kind of juggled three teams within this point of the discussion, being the Oilers, the Canadiens, and the New York Islanders. And we mentioned who the Islanders selected with the first, 16th, and 17th picks. Also on defense, they extended Alexander Romanov, and they re-signed Tony DeAngelo. This is not a bad defense heading into next season. I still think they're going to be hard-pressed to score. But defensively, I don't hate this back line as a collective group.
I mean, you take Brock Nelson out of their lineup now that's now in Colorado, and you take Noah Dobson out. That's two of their very best players on the team are gone. And, when does DeAngelo get himself in trouble with Patrick Waugh? Like he has with every other coach. Maybe he won't, but I don't know. They're in for a long year, for sure.
Between DeAngelo, Duclair, and Jonathan Drouin, who signed with the Islanders today, you've got three players in your lineup that have done an awful lot of moving around in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, that's true. But Jonathan Drouin did really redeem himself when he was in Colorado. He was third overall in 2013 to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Steve Yzerman had traded him to the Montreal Canadiens in a good trade for Tampa Bay to get Sergachev, the defenseman. And Drouin did not do real well in Montreal and ended up signing as a free agent with the Colorado Avalanche, where I think he did do very well for them. And again, he's good friends with Nate McKinnon, and maybe that really helped him. But he came into his own in Colorado. We're going to find out now, has he grown up, and is he able to get out there on his own in a new team and contribute to the New York Islanders?
They can certainly use it. Let's go back across the country now, or back across the continent to Los Angeles. I think they definitely make the final this year. You know why, of course.
Because they got Corey Perry.
They did. And pretty busy day for Ken Holland. And you had dinner with him over the weekend while you were in Los Angeles. So did you foresee the amount of movement that the Kings were going to make on this first day of free agency?
No, and we actually didn't even talk about it. Like we didn't, we were having a fun dinner with a couple other folks, and Tyler Wright was there, who works for Ken, and it was really just a fun night of telling stories and stuff. So we really didn't talk about free agency, but it makes all the sense in the world that Corey Perry would go to the Kings. He's an element that they perhaps don't have enough of, a loose cannon, a guy that's great on the power play, and he's good in the locker room. They do add Joel Armia from the Montreal Canadiens, Cody Ceci, who Kenny had in Edmonton as well, so he knows him well. The question mark for me is Dumoulin. What is his expectations of Dumoulin? Because I don't know how much he's got left in the tank. They lost a big one in Gavrikov to the Rangers. Hard to believe that the Rangers called Gavrikov at noon today when they were allowed to and negotiated a 7-year deal at $7 million within an hour and then announced it. I like the backup goalie pickup for the Kings. It was Anton Forsberg from the Ottawa Senators. He'll back up Darcy Kemper. Last year's backup, David Riddick, has gone to the New York Islanders, I would imagine to back up Sorokin, which makes you wonder what's going on with Varlamov, as he must be completely out now.
The domino effects that we see with a lot of these moves are always interesting to look at. And I think you're surmising correctly that they are certainly going to need some sort of serviceable backup for Sorokin, because the backup goaltending certainly wasn't there last year. And when the Islanders were trying to make that push, they essentially had to ride Sorokin every single game. You couldn't give him a blow at any point because every game was a must-win for them.
A heck of a goalie. I got to tell you, I've seen him play over 100 times, and he is a really good goaltender. And if he was he'd be way more noticeable if he was on a good team.
But I think as we see in this day and age, this is not the Glenn Hall era where you play 502 consecutive games. I mean, everybody has to get an appropriate workload if you're going to, A, be able to get into the playoffs, and then B, make any sort of mark. But, for the New York Islanders, that is something that is not quite yet on the horizon. And we'll see what these acquisitions do for them and the Kings. And let's move forward to, I think, something that surprised a lot of people, because there are players that you expect to leave. And the Canucks winger, Brock Besser, was right at the top of the list. That you had to figure there was no way he was going back to Vancouver. Everything that was said during the course of the season and him just allowing this to get to free agency. So instead of signing yesterday for maybe 8 years, he signed once free agency opened for 7 years at 7.25. And the Canucks also extended Connor Garland and goaltender Thatcher Demko. So it's very interesting moves out of Vancouver.
I don't know what Vancouver's management is doing. Like, what you wait till the July 1st to sign your own player? Like, if you're going to give him 7.25, you can be sure that his agent looked around and there was nobody else giving him 7 times 7.25. That's not my opinion on him. There's no way that another team was out there and he decided to stay with the Canucks.
But does that surprise you? I mean, he can pot 40 for you. And you don't think a team like the Islanders would want to go after a player that can snipe like that, and he would have been reunited with Bo Horvat.
Yeah, but he didn't put up a career year this year. He put up a career year the year before. This year, he didn't do a career year. He only got 25, I believe. So it was the 40 goal year was 23, 24. Okay. He slipped this year. I just don't understand what you're doing. If you're going to sign him, why didn't you sign him and take the heat off? I don't get it. But instead you wait and you become one of 32 teams instead of being the only team.
What do you say we stay west? And I thought very interesting with the San Jose Sharks, because they entered the day with $44 million in cap space, and they were still $19 million below the cap floor. And they had bought out longtime defenseman EdouardVlasic out of the last year of his contract. So that one kind of surprised me in that if you're trying to get to the floor, why wouldn't you keep this guy on your books at full price? But towards the end of the day, on Tuesday, they did sign John Klingberg. He was with Edmonton last year, 1 year for $4 million. Adam Gaudette, 2 years, $2 million AAV. And Philip Kurashev from the Blackhawks, 1 year, $1.2 million. So with those three signings, they did spend $7.2 million.
Yeah, so they were spending some money today. There was no earth-breaking news, though, coming out of San Jose.
Does that surprise you?
I thought they might do something, that would be a little bit more flashy. Now, can I break into something else here that just came across?
Yeah.
We talked about the Oilers and their bottom six. And they've just signed Matt Tompkins from Tampa Bay and Riley Stillman from Carolina, both to 2-year deals. So those are guys that they're looking at for depth players.
Correct me if I'm wrong here. I don't think that this flips the fortune of the franchise, though.
No, but we were talking about signing, getting depth into their organization. Obviously, they feel that these two guys give them some depth.
But the point we were making before, though, was their bottom six forwards.
It's depth.
Well, I want your take on this one, then. Earlier in the day, Carolina Hurricanes extend Logan Stankoven. And this was a club that I remember talking about earlier, probably right after the Hurricanes got knocked out of the playoffs, that this was going to be a team worth watching because a year ago they couldn't keep Jake Gensel. They couldn't keep Mikko Rantanen. Mitch Marner did not want to go there. And the question that was sitting was whether or not this franchise can attract and sign long-term a big-name player. So the move that they make on the first day of free agency was rather baffling in that they do a deal with AndreMiller, and this is a sign-and-trade also, with the New York Rangers, and they're going to pay him $60 million over 8 years, 7.5 AAV. The Hurricanes give up a first-round pick, a second-round pick, and defenseman Scott Morrow, who got a little bit of action during the playoffs this year. But again, this is the guy that's going to change the narrative in Carolina?
No. And what's Jacob Slavin going to say?
Yeah.
I don't get it, but, I've seen AndreMiller play a lot, as have you, and I don't think his game has gotten to $7 million per season level.
Well, you had said that the salaries have gotten completely out of control, and I think we have seen it, in particular, with this Miller deal, with Dobson, with Bouchard. I mean, these are all $1 to $1.5 million more than what they should be.
And on long term.
Yeah.
And no move and all this, no trade and all this stuff. And so they're saddled with them now. And we'll see how they do. But I can tell you, Raleigh, North Carolina isn't a hockey hotbed and a place that the revenue streams go through the roof. So I don't know how they do it. It's confusing to me. It's very confusing to me.
But for Tom Dundon and Eric Tulsky and extending right down to head coach Rod Brindamore, you have shown kind of the same look year after year after year, last 5, 6, 7 years. It all looks the same, that it's a good team. They play a system well, but the system doesn't work once you get to the second round of the playoffs.
Well, history shows us it certainly hasn't worked. And I don't think AndreMiller is going to change that.
No. So it circles back. There aren't a lot of big fish left out there. I mean, the biggest one is Nikolai Ehlers, who did not sign on the first day of free agency. I know that there are a lot of suitors out there. And maybe a place like Raleigh is some place that he wants to go because he's out of the vacuum of a Canadian city in Winnipeg. But unless they can land somebody like him, the image that we're going to have of the Carolina Hurricanes is going to be exactly the same when we start the new season in October.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, I guess the AndreMiller trade and sign says the end of Brent Burns.
It's possible.
40 years old.
Yeah.
Contract expired. But I got to tell you, though, if you go into a game tomorrow, who would you rather have on your defense tomorrow? Mm-hmm. Brent Burns or AndreMiller?
I want Brent Burns because he still can shoot. He still can make disciplined plays. He can still defend. He's played over 900 consecutive games also, which I think flies under the radar for a lot of people. And what we've seen with Miller is he has some offensive gifts. He skates well. He's a defensive liability. And I think that his judgment on making pinches at the offensive blue line has been historically terrible. So good luck trying to manage that in Carolina.
And there's some issues off ice, apparently. So we'll see. Let's just see.
Enough time spent on that. Our last item, we're going to go back to Toronto here. John Tavares and Matthew Knies both re-up with the Leafs. Tavares is a UFA. Knies is an RFA. Tavares took 60% less than his last contract. So he's going to get $4.38 versus $11 million on his last deal. And this was something interesting that Steve Simmons had written in one of his Sunday columns a few weeks ago, saying that if Tavares wants to stay in Toronto, he needs to take way less because he's gotten his money already. And it's time for others to reap those benefits. And indeed, that's exactly what happened here.
No, and I don't know John Tavares, but I got to tell you, I'm very impressed with him in the last 2 years and how he's handled himself in Toronto. I think he's a quality guy and he's going to be good for young players.
Knies signs for 6 years, 7.75, and they also keep Steven Lorentz. It's a very serviceable forward for them last year, 3 years at 1.35.
Yes, they saved Tavares. Yes, they signed young Knies to a good contract. They kept Lorentz, who's a Stanley Cup winner. But I think a big blunder was on Pontus Holmberg, who they did not qualify, and Tampa Bay gave him a 2-year deal. I don't know why you wouldn't qualify an NHL player, a guy that you know can play, is a depth guy, and you just let him walk out the door.
A couple of other notable signings before we sign off here. Mikael Granlund goes to Anaheim, 3 years, $21 million, $7 million a year cap hit. Pat Verbeek had plenty of space there, and this is one club that continues to raise eyebrows and in a pretty good way, and that's the Ducks.
I think the Ducks are going to be better next year. They're going to be banging on the door to make the playoffs. They do have some addition by subtraction, too. I won't go into that, but I think they've got some addition by addition this year in this offseason as well. So we'll see what the Orange Ducks can do.
You weren't talking Zegras, were you?
I'll let you figure that one out.
Evgeny Dadonov signs for 1 year for $1 million in New Jersey. So the biggest names that are still out there, as we mentioned, Nikolai Ehlers, Hugh Suter in Vancouver, defenseman Dmitry Orlov, and defenseman Brent Burns.
Here's a big one for you. Kyle Dubas has swooped in and signed Seth Jones's brother, Caleb Jones, to a 2-year contract.
You see the Pens any better?
I'm being a little facetious here.
That'll do it for NHL Wraparound, first day of free agency in 2025. We will be back on Thursday with our special guest from Sportsnet and 32 Thoughts podcast, Elliot Friedman. So in the meantime, remember, please subscribe. Our numbers are picking up very nicely there. And thanks to everybody that's listening in, that's referring us. Like us on Facebook. Neil and I look forward to speaking with you on Thursday.
Thanks for joining us on the NHL Wraparound podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all the NHL action.